We'll get going because we've got a jam-packed agenda for the day, and I really want to make sure we have plenty of time to hear from our panelists. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining, those of you who have come. We are really excited to host you this Fair Trade Fortnight to our Fair Focus. Today's topic is all about the climate crisis, the climate justice campaign that we're running, and what is the role of businesses and what can they play in this space. So really excited to unpack that further with you. My name's Anna. I'm your host for today. I'm Head of Responsible Business at the Fair Trade Foundation. I've been with Fair Trade for 4 years in various different roles, which have included working on flowers with Co-op and cocoa with Ben & Jerry's, so in excellent company with today's panel. Which does lead me nicely on introducing you to who we've got with us today. So Catherine Higgs has joined us. She is Head of Food Policy at the Co-op. Catherine leads Co-op's work on ethical food and food policy issues, and her team are responsible for defining strategy and plans on key public policy and deal with issues as diverse as ethical trade, fair trade, health and wellbeing, sustainable sourcing, etc. We are also joined by Rebecca Barron, who is Head of Activism and Social Mission at Ben & Jerry's Europe. Rebecca helps the company use its platform to create systemic change. She's an experienced campaigner and activist, having worked on issues such as climate change, refugee rights, gender equality, and tax justice for a number of NGOs. We are also joined by Shah from B-Lab UK, where she's co-founder and activist in residence. She is also co-director at the Oxford Climate Emergency Programme and designed and teaches an MBA elective on regenerative and circular economy at the Business School at the University of Oxford. So certainly very busy. And lastly, we are joined by Kabasu, Operations Manager at Fairtrade Africa. Kabasu has joined live from Côte d'Ivoire, where he has been running trainings with cocoa farmers, so won't be able to join on video, but will be joining through audio, and phenomenal effort to be able to tune in from that remote location. So huge thanks, Kabasu. He works for Fairtrade Africa in the Eastern and Central African Network, where he's been for 8 years. And with plenty of experience and lots of different roles. He, of many programs that he manages, also leads the Fair Trade Alliance for Climate Smart Supply Chains in Africa, or FACSCA as it's briefly called, which is a collaboration we have between Fair Trade Africa and the Co-op, and you'll hear plenty more about that today. So huge welcome to everyone for joining. Thank you so much for tuning in. For housekeeping purposes, just to let you know, the session is being recorded. Please chat and ask questions, just pop them in the chat. We'll type some responses as we can go, and I'll also make sure we have time for Q&A after our panel as well. So please do put them in throughout. We also have a poll at the end of the session. So if you can just stay tuned to the final minutes, that would be great, as we would love your participation in the poll. So without much further ado, as you've come to hear from the panel today, just to set the scene with regards to climate and what we are discussing, and also the wider kind of Fair Trade Fortnight that we're talking about. We obviously know that the climate crisis is live right now and affecting many of the world's poorest and most vulnerable communities. The IPCC report that came out earlier this week has really just hammered home that we are at risk of some irreversible and very severe damage from the climate change that we are seeing. And we also know that this climate crisis isn't fair. So 17 people in Côte d'Ivoire release the same amount of carbon footprint as one person in the UK. And that the top 10% of the world's wealth generates 50% of the world's carbon emissions. And yet it's the farmers and the workers on the front line growing and producing our food who are hit the hardest by climate crisis, who don't have that support and that network to be able to adapt or mitigate or build their resilience to climate. We all know that everyone has a role to play in this, including government, including the consumer market, including every single one of us here, but also businesses have a really important role to play. And we're really excited to be joined by a variety of experts in that space. We launched a business pledge for COP26 at the end of last year, and this made 4 asks for those who signed our pledge. The first was to pay fair prices. The second was to build long-term commitments with farming communities and really build that partnership in your supply chain. The third was to know and show your climate impact. And the fourth was to advocate and speak up for farmers and workers in forums you represent. We have 27 signatories, of which members of the panel are part, and we've reopened that pledge this fortnight for other businesses to sign, and we'd love to have you join that. We will be launching a network on the back of that pledge of like-minded businesses who care about climate and want to support the workers in their supply chain. So without much further ado, I will pass over to the panel, and to kickstart us and maybe really set the scene, Kabasio, it'd be really great to hear from you about what you've seen from your experience on the ground with regards to climate change and how that's affecting farmers and growers in the regions where you work.
Thank you very much, Anna, and fellow panelists and participants. First of all, for your time, for coming to listen to this very important discussion about climate change. Yes, it's true that climate change is real, and as you have alluded, the released report by IPCC clearly demonstrates that climate change is a crisis for humanity. And definitely, we need to take action. But from experience and working with the farmers in Africa in different value chains, it's clear that climate change is having an effect on their livelihoods. And what we are currently seeing is that because these are farmers and workers who depend on main crops, cocoa, tea, flowers for their livelihood, we are seeing a reduction in yields, which directly translates to food security concerns. And also, if this is happening, then the world at large is at risk. Number two, the other thing that we're seeing are temperature rises, and this particularly has effects on those involved in coffee production and also cocoa. And we are seeing increased coffee diseases, and when there's increase in coffee diseases, definitely the impact is that there'll be more investment for farmers to ensure that they're able to manage the diseases, investment in advanced technology to control such diseases that also comes at an expense. So it means that the cost of production is definitely increasing as a result of increase in temperatures. And what you're also seeing is the shrinking land under production. So it means that as climate change comes, areas are becoming dry and drier. And those that were meant for either cocoa or coffee production, we are seeing now farmers are going and getting more into forest to get better land with better fertility content where they can produce this crop. And of course, in the process, reducing the carbon sinks in the atmosphere. But most significantly, the climatical events that we are seeing increased droughts, we are seeing increased floods, we are seeing storms. The recent one in Malawi and part of Madagascar, Storm Anna, that has really affected the tea and sugarcane farmers in Malawi and also parts of Madagascar. So allow me to stop there, but still I'll come in and contribute more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kabasio. And maybe just staying with you for a minute, because obviously those impacts are really, really challenging for farmers. And you know, we've heard from all of the kind of outreach that you do in Fairtrade Africa that this is their #1 priority. As part of that, we, you know, Co-op and Fairtrade Africa have come together to set up the Fairtrade Alliance for Climate Smart Supply Chains in Africa. Maybe just to kind of, you know, give a briefing to the audience on what that is and how that reflects the powers of farmers and workers, and just a tiny bit more about that program so we can understand what might be some of the solutions in this space for the challenges they are facing at the moment.
Yeah, sure. The Fairtrade Alliance for Climate Smart Supply Chain in Africa is an exceptional program that comes with a different approach to how we address climate change, mitigation, adaptation, mainly focusing at how it can benefit farmers. And it's exceptional in the sense that this is a kind of partnership that focuses on empowering farmers such that the solution, the practices, and even the planning of the activities towards addressing the effects of climate change are in the hands of farmers and workers. So here is giving the power to farmers that you can use your own knowledge, you can use your own skill, you can share and learn in some of the best practices towards addressing the effects of climate change. And also building onto the foundation of fair trade that is more about empowerment of farmers and workers, so that the decision they make, the investment they make, are towards improving their livelihoods. But the other thing that is interesting about this partnership is how the role of young people is coming at the forefront in the fight against the effects of climate change. Because working with young people and creating the centers where young people can learn on technologies to help mitigate effects of climate change is really an excellent idea. That in the long run, we are building generations that will help curb the effects of climate change, but also at the same time involving the young people into these value chains such that they can learn and also appreciate that they have a role to play as far as mitigation of climate change is concerned. So basically, the uniqueness is that the management of this program, everything, the design, the monitoring is being run by experts, and these experts are actually farmers, with Fair Trade Africa providing the backstopping. And huge thanks to COP, because they've really come in strongly to ensure that we are as much as possible helping the supply chains to reduce the carbon emissions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kabasu. And yeah, it's such an exciting program working in tea, coffee, and flowers across Kenya, Ethiopia, and Rwanda. There's 12 producer groups that they're working with, representing 16,000 farmers and workers, but with an estimated reach of 65,000 indirect beneficiaries, supported to climate change resilience and adaptation and mitigation. So an amazing program there, funded by the Co-op. So coming to you, Catherine, I know that program is there to sort of match point 7 of your 10-point plan, that the Co-op's really, moving very fast in this space and very committed to it. You obviously signed our business pledge. Maybe you could tell the audience a little bit about your motivations to sign that pledge and your kind of interest in this space more broadly.
Hi Anna, hi everybody, great to join you in Fairtrade Fortnight. I won't tell you how many of these I've joined over the years, but it's always a pleasure and a real highlight to my year. So absolutely love to tell you why we signed the pledge. And before I start, I'm going to kind of just apologise, because I think I'm probably going to repeat quite a few of the things that have been said already, but I'll give them a bit of a Co-op spin if that's okay. So Anna, you kind of kicked off, and Kabasu said that climate change is real, it's life-threatening, the science is clear, it's indisputable, and climate change is already affecting the foods we rely on, and most importantly, the people that produce them. From a Co-op perspective, over the last few years, our members at our AGM have kind of made it really, really clear to us that we need to recognise the climate emergency and accelerate our Co-op response. And they are also incredibly passionate about fair trade and the people that produce the food that we consume every day. So when we launched the 10-point plan, which was launched last year, it feels much longer ago, but it was only last year, we put humanity right at the heart of that plan, as well as all the science, as well as all the things we've got to do about reductions. We knew that actually we needed to put people at the heart of that plan, because, as we've already heard, despite contributing the least to climate crisis, smallholder farmers in the global south are absolutely bearing the brunt of this and have really limited resources to adapt to the emergency. It's a really sad fact that today the people that grow lots of the ingredients of the foods that we love and that we consume every day are living in poverty. And that's why Co-op is really passionate about fair trade, it's passionate about this issue. Fair trade for us is an absolutely unique proposition, thanks to the standard, the minimum premium, the social premium, and the emphasis on producer voice and engagement, as we've heard from Kabasu. It's really, really core to our response to all of this. So that's why we're so committed to fair trade and everything that it stands for, but why climate justice is absolutely at the heart of our plans, because we recognise the need to kind of work for that just transition for everybody, So just to loop back to your original question, all of those reasons, all of those things I just talked about are the reasons why we signed the Fairtrade Business Pledge, which as you've already explained, calls on government to take action, calls on businesses to take a lead and to stand up and to be open about their impacts, but also to support their growers and their producers on that transition that needs to happen to kind of make sure that our supply chains are fit for the future. And again, just one final point, you know, the values and the principles of the fair trade movement really align with our own co-op principles, and have done for very many years. So for us, it was just an absolutely no-brainer that, of course, the co-op would sign up to this. So really delighted that we've done it, and would absolutely encourage other businesses to do the same.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Catherine. And it's such a nice kind of example of a partnership that we have and that you've built with Fairtrade Africa in this space. And really from the IPCC report, it was clear that partnerships were going to be critical if we were to come together to combat some of this. Maybe Shah, turning to you, it would be great for you to kind of tell the audience how you think the Fairtrade and B-Lab partnership could work, how we overlap in the goals that we have and the work we're doing together for businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say this is my first Fairtrade Fortnight, but having Catherine heard that you've been to many of them, I can't wait to come to future ones. This is already an excellent conversation. And I do want to just acknowledge before going into a few reflections to your great question, Caboose, what you were sharing really hit me. You know, I feel like sometimes we can read a lot of reports and listen and see things on the news, but just hearing your reflections, both in terms of what you're seeing and what you're experiencing, and also the work you're doing. I felt the energy around the young people. So I just wanted to, you know, acknowledge that when someone says something that you hear and then you feel, I feel it's important to recognize it. And I certainly heard and felt it. So thank you. And in terms of the, you know, the B Corp conversation and how we work in harmony and in connection with the important work of fair trade. I mean, for those of you who were on a little bit earlier, you saw my very unintentional fashion thing that I did, which was, you know, I start my day with my, you know, Cafe Direct coffee, just so happens to match my shirt. But, you know, it's very clear, you know, we got logo on one side and B Corp logo on the other. So we are together and we are partnering in extraordinary ways, but actually we can look back and very much the work of this community was part of the influence in the early days of the B Corp movement. So I feel like we've been on this journey together and we have very much learned and been inspired by the important work that's been done in the past and why it's so exciting to be working in partnership. Now, I think we have a lot of things in common as a movement, you know, very much in our theory of change. It's about recognizing that business has an important role to play and that business can be a force for good. So I think part of what both our organizations do is we want to shine light on those organizations that are leaning into these challenges and taking action. So I think that's really sort of a strong connection between what we both do. And I think we're also both very moved by measuring the things that matter. And as many people will know, within the B Corp certification, actually, if you can say you are fair trade certified, it actually gets you points on the impact assessment, whether it's through your impact business model or in some of the questions that we have around fair wages and working conditions. So we already, I think, have so much in common. And I think there is so much more we can continue to do together. So this new partnership is super exciting for us at B-Lab. And I think it reflects this moment that we're really in, which is the problems that are facing our world are interconnected. And I think it is upon all of us to recognize that organizations will reach the new levels of engaging in these problems to address them by collaborating and working together. So I'm personally really inspired by this idea of how we can come together as a movement of movements, share what we're learning, work together, holding hands, and sort of singing in harmony when it comes to addressing these really quite critical and interconnected emergencies that I think we've already spoken about and grounded in this conversation so far. So yeah, in summary, we're big fans. We're so excited to be partnering with you and so excited about what's going to come next.
Amazing, thanks, Shah. And I wish I had coordinated my outfit with my favorite Fairtrade B Corp products. So next time. And that idea of business as a force for good, Rebecca, that is really at the heart of Ben and Jerry's. You guys have always been known for really kind of delivering change through your platform as a large global business. You're an activism and value-led organization. Maybe you could just explain how you think that's very important to tackling some of the issues of our time.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again for having me. And it's so wonderful to be part of this panel with these fab people. Yeah, so hopefully it's not a strange idea to anybody that Ben and Jerry founded their business back in 1978 with that very clear idea that business could be a force for good. So making sure that they were sourcing their ingredients fairly, they were supporting local producers. You know, back when they started in South Burlington in Vermont, they bought all of their dairy from local family-run farms. And Ben and Jerry, there's a lot that comes about by accident with Ben and Jerry, right? They're just these two guys who want to crack on, have a good time, and try and live out their values in everything they do. So it really started, I mean, Annie, you said about us being a global business. It really started with their cafe, you know, it started with this little cafe that they had. And it was sort of a good few years into the business where they realized that actually, hey, we've got a connection with folks. We've built, not only have we built this business that runs on the principles that we hold dear, principles of justice and equity and equality and peace, actually was really big for them as well. But we've also built this community, and we've built this connection with people who really love our ice cream and love who we are and love what we do. And they came to this realization that businesses have a platform, you know, they have a responsibility to use that platform well. And Ben always says, you know, businesses have a responsibility to give back to the community. Jerry always says, if it's not fun, why do it? So these are our sort of two principles that we try and bring into some of our activism work as well. And when you take a step back, you know, as an activist, I think in movements, I think as sort of in big sort of societal level pictures, businesses have a really important role to play, not only in their operations, but also in using that platform to talk to the people that they talk to. You know, there's so much that goes into marketing and advertising. There's so much opportunity for communicating positive values and trying to bring people into movements that a lot of businesses, I think, sometimes feel scared to do. But the way that we go about it is that we recognize that, you know, we're the ice cream people. We don't necessarily know everything there is to know. I mean, barely touch the surface of everything there is to know about the issues that we're passionate about, you know, racial justice, refugee rights, of course, climate justice for a very long time as well. So what we do is we partner with experts in the movement, and we've talked a bit about movements already. Partnerships, relationships, they are so crucial to driving this systemic change. And for us, it's about partnering with our experts and then bringing the folks that eat Ben and Jerry's, the folks that read our posts, read our blogs, see our adverts around, and bringing them into the movement. So it's trying to sort of bridge the gap between folks that might not ordinarily be reached by experts like Fairtrade, like other NGOs in this space, and really bring them in to what they're already trying to do. So a good example of this is we actually partnered with Fairtrade in a slightly unusual turn for our relationship, which was really great. We partnered with Fairtrade in the run up to the COP last year, to really try and bring this message to the Ben & Jerry's fans that climate justice is really, really important. And we need to be thinking about these vulnerable communities, marginalized communities, folks whose voices haven't been heard, who haven't had a seat at the table, and making sure that the transition to a clean economy is also a just economy. So yeah, that was a really fab activation that we did. We got a lot of folks reading about Fairtrade producers and taking action and signing up to support the pledge from Fairtrade farmers. Yeah, it's a really crucial thing for us to remember that we are one of many actors in a movement, and it's not about us. It's about the issues, and it's about the folks that are affected by them. So we're just sort of excited to be able to bring what we've got in terms of our tools, our techniques, you know, the creativity that we have, the fun, the marketing know-how that we have, plus the ice cream that we have, try and bring those to the table to draw in this movement to really push forward systemic change.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Rebecca. And what I love in your response there is just some really practical advice for any businesses in the audience who are maybe wondering, how do they do this, about partnering with experts, about, you know, partnering with fair trade, about engaging with your audience. So maybe thinking about the kind of practicalities of how do you move forward and what can feel quite overwhelming sometimes. Catherine, coming to you, how are the Co-op fulfilling the pledge as a business? What are you doing in this space, practically speaking?
Hi there. I just wanted to say I really enjoyed that bit of information about Ben & Jerry's, and particularly about the kind of origin story. And I'm really conscious, I feel like I need to explain a bit about my background in here. Here at the Co-op we have lots of meeting rooms obviously, and they've all got a little bit of kind of Co-op history in them. So the room I'm sitting in at the moment is talking about our first store back in Toad Lane in Rochdale back in 1884. And I moved just slightly before because there's some very strange little characters down the wall here that I think are supposed to represent either some of the early founding Co-op members or maybe partners in the business, but not quite sure. But anyway, and there's Co-op buildings behind me, so just conscious that it might look a bit odd as I move around. So how are we supporting the business pledge? Well, I think the first thing obviously is through the sourcing decisions that we've made as a Co-op over the last kind of 20 odd years. And, you know, I think they speak for themselves. So, you know, our commitments around 100% tea, coffee, sugar, cocoa, bananas, the really great position that we've got on wine and on flowers all represent, you know, or kind of speak for themselves really. But the thing that I'd probably most like to talk about is the work that we've done on projects with communities, with growers over the years, and the journey that we've been on in terms of that as well. So, you know, Co-op has got a history of going above and beyond, and over the years that we've been involved with Fair Trade, we've supported many projects that have had really great impact on producer communities and have really helped to strengthen them. But I think, you know, we've had a bit of a step change recently, and I think, you know, like everybody else, when COVID hit, everybody kind of like took a little bit of a thought or a step back and just thought, actually, you know, oh my goodness, this is just exposing that complete fragility of everything that we hold dear. You know, global supply chains felt at the time that they were held together with little bits of string, to be quite frank, and it was quite a challenging time. And what it did was it really exposed those kind of vast inequalities that are out there, particularly in those producer communities. As I've said, those producers that grow all of those ingredients that we use every day, and some of which we absolutely love. I can't go a day without coffee or a bit of chocolate, and I'm sure I'm not the only person. But, you know, what that did to us was kind of make us think about how we engage with those producer communities to have the biggest impact and to make the most significant change, rather than maybe just little individual projects that in their own are brilliant, but maybe they don't add up to something that's bigger than that. So what we did was we kind of focused our support into, as Caruso said, into the programme that Fair Trade Africa are running. That's incredibly important because, you know, the key point, and I wrote it down again when it was mentioned before, was the programme's being designed and directed by the producers, the people that really know what they need to do. You know, who are we to tell anybody what they need to do? Actually, we need to all listen. And because of that, we're able to kind of, you know, focus the Co-op investment into those projects to achieve deeper, more sustainable impact than kind of one-off projects. And I think for us, that has been a real game changer. I'm not going to go over the stats and figures, Anna, that you talked about at the beginning of the session around, you know, numbers of individuals and cooperatives and communities that are involved. They are really, really significant. But for us, this has to be the way forward. You know, the challenges are too significant for us to risk frittering away impact on small projects. We need to think about what is going to drive transformational change and help those communities move along that transition. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet. So that's our contribution, Anna.
Amazing. Thank you, Catherine. And I can confirm you're not the only one who can't go a day without coffee or chocolate. So coming back to you, Rebecca, maybe on this theme of, what can you do really tangibly as a business in this area? You've been, talked about speaking out for climate action and the kind of activations that you've done in that space. Could you maybe refer to another way that Ben & Jerry's has helped fulfill the business pledge that you also took at COP26?
Yeah, of course. So just sort of stepping back broadly, we're fair trade, fully fair trade, super proud of that. In 2020, our fair trade sourcing generated about $5 million in the fair trade premium. And we'd like to go further. So we've also co-developed a living income accelerator program across things like cocoa and vanilla, which is supporting higher incomes, productivity. Kabasi talked about professional development, things like that as well. And we're also diving into our cocoa as well. So we've committed a living income price for the cocoa that goes into our base mix. And I think last year about 5,000 cocoa farmers would have received an additional $600,000 on top of their premium. So we're fully committed to fair trade, and we're also fully committed to taking it further. And as you said, Catherine, kind of working with the producers to help design programs and interventions that really are effective and what they need. When it comes to the climate portion, the pledge talks about knowing and showing your carbon impact. We're a dairy company. We're fully aware that this is part of the problem. In 2020, we've just published our new SEER report, which is the report that kind of goes through our social environmental commitments, and you can read all about it in our website. We've just published the one for 2020. And in that year, we were responsible for emitting more than 500,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. At the moment, each of our pints has got about a 1.2 kilogram carbon footprint. That's coming down. More than half of that is from the dairy. Since 2015, we've been working with the science-based target initiatives to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions across all three scopes, 1, 2, 3, all of our supply chain end to end. And we've got a whole strategy for how we want to do that, which again, you can read fully about in the SEER report. But just to highlight, we've identified 3 key priorities in terms of driving that carbon footprint down. And they include direct interventions on farm to reduce emissions. So that's things like changing the feed of the cows to reduce the enteric emissions, because that's where a lot of the carbon equivalent comes from. We are looking at how we design our products. We're proud of our ice cream. We talk about it being the best possible ice cream made in the best possible way, and that includes best for the earth. So looking at how we design our base mix and how we design the inclusions and the overall product architecture with that carbon footprint, with that climate lens in mind. And then finally, we have non-dairy. We actually have this lovely range of vegan ice creams, which to my mind are delicious. I hope other people enjoy them as well. And it's going to be a big part of our strategy to increase that portfolio relative to the dairy, and actually try and grow that category, really, to make sure that people can access non-dairy ice cream who make that decision for themselves, but also then that our overall footprint comes down because we're producing non-dairy flavours which have roughly the third of a carbon footprint of a dairy flavour. So like I said, there's loads more information on our website. If folks are interested, I can pop a link to the current SEER report in the chat as well, and you can deep dive and nerd out, if you like, on all of our carbon pieces there.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Rebecca. The vegan range is absolutely delicious, and the new Sunday range, if the audience hasn't had a chance to try that too, that's very nice. Kabasi, we've heard from 2 businesses there who have really maximized their fair trade sourcing commitments as a way to kind of combat some of these challenges. Could you maybe just explain how the fair trade standards and the minimum price and the fair trade premium helps farmers and workers to mitigate against the climate crisis?
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna. The fair trade standards, fair trade premium, and fair trade minimum price, these are basically tools that are used within the fair trade system to ensure that benefits accrued both to farmers and workers. And perhaps to put it in simpler way, take an example of minimum price. This is a safety net that ensures that the businesses are not sourcing below the market price. And this basically means that when they do that, and it's a practice that we encourage that most businesses come on board and support fair trade, farmers are able to achieve a fair price. A fair price in the sense that they're able to recoup the cost of sustainable production so that their farming practices are not being done at a loss. And that's a plus, even as we talk about climate change, because in any business that you do, be it farming, if you are able to make profits, that means that you have sufficient resources to invest in other activities. So I look at it as a best initiative, and also tools that if farmers can achieve a fair price for their produce, then they are able to prioritize and invest in climate change over other needs. Because if they're not then getting fair price, it means other needs like housing, medicine, access to school, access to medical care will take a priority. So we need to really see how businesses can really pay farmers a fair price and also premium, because if they pay if they're able to remit premium to farmers, then such premium can also be used in investment in climate projects. So without really looking at this tool critically, then there's no hope that we can address climate change. So basically it's a call to businesses to pay a fair price as a key tool, or fair to minimum price, and also help farmers implement some of the practices in fair trade standard, one of which key, looking at coffee, is developing plans towards climate change mitigation, and this will go a long way in building resilience for farmers and workers. But also allow me mention one thing which could be very interesting, and it's a good example of how we are working with businesses. This is the investment from the COP under the Partnership for Fair Trade Alliance for Climate Smart Supply Chains in Africa. This is a broad program. I didn't mention the pillars when I did the intro, but perhaps it's good to mention that it's a program that has been built on all these, how these tools come into play: the fair trade standards, the minimum price, and also the fair trade premium, such that it's targeted at building resilience, helping farmers earn income, and most significantly, farmers being in the drivers of the process, in the sense that whatever they produce, this produce goes to COP UK, because we are working with COP UK supply chains. So definitely COP is sourcing their produce at a fair price. COP will definitely pay them premium, and this will also help in compliance against the fair trade standard, because there is a motivation behind it that we are complying, we are getting benefits, and we're able to invest in climate change projects that are beneficial both to farmers and workers. Yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kabasu. And I think that, the message about paying a fair price and needing to empower farmers and workers in this space, which does mean that they have the resources to invest in it, we can't make the ask of them otherwise, is kind of at the heart of the pledge. And that is the first ask we make in the pledge, is to pay a fair price. Shah, going over to you, what role do you see this pledge playing within the corporate activism space?
Yeah, thank you. It's such a great question, and I'll address it. I have two quick reflections though, just to say on the back of this story that you've just heard about the partnership. I mean, I think these are the things we really need to capture, are really clear and tangible examples of where the empowerment is taking place, and again, just recognizing the holistic view of people's livelihoods. So again, I was taking a ton of notes down as both these stories were being told, and I think just documenting them and finding ways to share them is going to be really important. I also am a big believer in rejecting an either or approach. So I do want to also just say that I generally have coffee and chocolate most days, not one or the other. I don't feel like I have to choose. I can have both. And I'm actually having a dinner party tonight, and one of the things we're going to do is have some of the Ben and Jerry's vegan ice cream. So I just want to say thank you, because it's going to be fun to try that out with a few friends that are coming around the table here. So, but getting to your question, it's interesting timing for it because we are just concluding at B-Lab UK what we've been calling the discovery phase of the Activist Business Project. And what that's involved is sort of really trying to understand where and how businesses are engaging more in activism. And some of the things that we've really picked up is, you know, linked to the pledge very immediately, which is we have to make sure we are business are telling the truth. That's a key part about activism is being really clear and upfront. And that's why, Rebecca, you know, I just have a lot of respect for what you're doing and the transparency you're bringing to, you know, where you're doing well and where there's areas to improve. This idea of really being absolutely clear and transparent and telling the truth, and then connecting that with really taking a stand, right? Really being clear on the things that really matter to you. And I think that's where the pledge comes in, you know, signing your name, publicly saying these things are important to us as an organization, and we are committed to taking action on them. Two other really interesting insights that have come up through this Activist Business Project, they'll also include, and I think are underpinning the work that is being talked about here today, that to be a business activist means that you are being moved by what we know is needed rather than being limited by what feels possible. I just ask people to reflect on that a little bit, because I think sometimes we find there's a lot of talk of this is what we can make happen. This is what's possible. That's kind of okay if it's a step, but actually what the North Star needs to be is what we can see is needed. And that comes from the science when it comes to climate change. It also comes to what we know in our hearts is needed when we think about the lives of people around the world, sort of that sort of global sense of citizenship and empathy. So that's a really important point that I think really should underpin any action that businesses are engaging is just, again, being guided by what is needed, not limited by just what seems possible in the short term. The other interesting insight that came up is this idea that actually to really truly engage in activism, I mean, one of the lines we've already talked about here is collaboration and how important it is. But it is about recognizing that your business can be a tool for the activism, for the change you seek. But it's really important that activism does not become a tool for your business. So hopefully that's come across right. So your business is a tool that could be used to achieve the aims of the activism that's out there, but it cannot be activism as a way to sort of, you know, do something that's more about serving the business. So again, those are just sort of some of the insights that have emerged in this work. And that is why, again, coming back to the pledge, it's, I think, really critical to create the spaces where people can publicly take a stand around some agreed principles, showing we can bring critical mass together. But I think it's also important for us to make those pledges and link them to the actions that we know are going to be needed, and recognize that in doing that, sometimes we're going to have to get a little bit uncomfortable. But if it were comfortable, we probably would have already done it. So I think that's one of the things I'd also just invite the businesses that are out there to be thinking about as ways in which they can stretch further. So yes, signing the pledges and really figuring out what that means to take action on those pledges so that it comes to life, and recognizing and holding in some ways that discomfort, because that probably is a really good signal you're on the right path of doing something really leading.
I love that, Shah. We say that a lot often, is that, yeah, if it was easy, we would have done it by now. That's why we're all here and that's what we're working towards. And it's really important, I think, that people understand and recognize there's challenges and it's difficult, but, you know, that's why it's important to get stuck in. And Catherine, on that theme of kind of business activation and activism and how does it serve your business, what do you see sort of broader, bigger picture, the role of businesses in climate action, particularly in the run up to COP27 this year being?
Hi, thank you for that. And thank you, Shah. That was really fascinating. And before I dive into your question, Anna, I'd just like a bit of a reflection on one of the things that Shah said around, you know, do what's needed. And I think that's really important. And I think part of that is, you know, invest and take the time to understand what is needed, not what you think is needed. And to do that, we all need to be better listeners and engage with the people that really know what matters and what needs to happen. And that has to be finding time to talk and listen to the producers and the growers and the communities on the ground. So that was something that really struck me, and thank you for sharing that, Shah, because I think it's a really important piece. So kind of what do I think is the role of businesses as we run up to the next COP? Can you believe it? I think, you know, what we need to see more of, and what we are seeing more of actually, and I think it's really, really positive, is greater cooperation. These challenges are too big for any one organisation, any one government, any one individual to really make a difference on their own. So really to kind of, to drive that transformation, we need to see more cooperation to ensure a fairer world, to protect both people, planet, and nature, for the generations, you know, to come in the future. So that has to be kind of core to it. And in terms of businesses, I think, you know, it's quite difficult to hear, but businesses need to recognise that they need to work for a fairer and just transition for people and planet. So, you know, it's obvious, but solving the climate crisis can't come at the expense of the people that can least afford it. And again, just to go back to the co-op, that's why we put climate justice right at the heart of our 10-point climate plan. And it's why in about late summer last year, we launched our climate justice report, which called on governments to deliver on their international climate finance commitments. It's called on businesses to step up and invest in climate resilience and a just transition within their supply chains around the world. And that's something that's core to our campaigning this Fair Trade Fortnight, but also, you know, beyond that as well. And obviously it links really well with the Fair Trade Business Pledge as well. Reflecting a little bit back on the last COP26, which feels really close, but also a long time ago in a strange kind of way, is the sense that, you know, the last COP was the COP where it really felt that businesses really showed up. There was a lot of engagement from businesses at COP, lots of CEOs, our own included, prioritised getting time there, getting their voices heard, and being part of that dialogue that sat around the whole COP. So I think as I look forward to the next COP, COP27, I think there is there are lots of questions around the promises that businesses made at COP26. So, you know, the questions around, okay, brilliant that you stepped up, but what progress has been made since then? You know, over that last kind of 12 months, it will be by the time we get to COP27. And actually, even more importantly, how is this kind of playing through into your concrete business plans, both in the short, the medium term and the long term? Because we're on a journey here. This is going to take time, but we need to move quickly and at pace to kind of drive the change that's needed. You know, I think I'm always, you know, there are loads of bold commitments made from businesses, but also, you know, government as well, kind of stepping up to kind of say what needs to be said. But I think we need some really ambitious leadership from this, both within the business community and politically. And for us, you know, we are watching, and we will be making our voice heard if we don't see that there is the progress that is required to drive that change. So basically, I think great steps were made at COP26, fantastic, but have you done what you said you'd do? And, you know, now is not the time for kind of empty words and promises. Now is the time to deliver and really double down on that delivery, because things are too fragile, too important to not do that. So that's kind of, I guess, the last thing that I'd like to say on that.
Amazing, thanks, Catherine. And yeah, I mean, from our side at Fairtrade, we've really seen that backed up by consumer research too, that consumers really want to know what businesses are doing and delivering, and they don't just want empty claims and words out there. So definitely seems it's the move in the market. I'm very conscious of time, so I'll just ask one last question to the panel before I open up for Q&A, which is just to you, Shah, because I feel like there may be quite a few businesses listening to this thinking, well, you know, we pay a fair price and we do this with our farmers and we try and deliver this, but we're not activists. We're not necessarily out there campaigning or getting involved in this as a movement. What would you say to those businesses about why it's important for activism specifically to deliver on climate resilient supply chains?
What a great question. And I also just want to take a bit of a step back on it, because I think the word activism is charged. You know, some people are are more comfortable with than others. And I think the key is that we do all need to get uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be a barrier or an obstacle to taking action. So whether you call yourself an activist business or not, I think key is to think about what you're currently doing and then figure out how you can go further. And not just go further on your own, but go further with others. So I think that's kind of the key message. And when it comes to the activism and the taking action that we're talking about, I think all the things we've talked about here today is just really holding that empathy and that sense of a mindset that's about beyond what's just in your immediate worldview. Like, we really need to be thinking globally. You know, Catherine, I had like just yes about the size and scale of the actions that are needed and how we do need to work together in order to make them happen. And you know, one of the other things that I think is critical to whether you call it activism or taking action is we need to work at a systems level at this stage of the game. We've had to for a long time, actually, but that's where the action is needed. And that's where what we need to be doing is looking at ways to change the rules of the game. So yes, absolutely, taking action in our own businesses, working with others to do things in collaboration, because we will go further and faster when we go together, and recognizing the real importance of the rules of the game that need to be changed. And I could talk a whole lot more about that, but maybe that's for a separate conversation.
Amazing, thank you. And what a fantastic kind of call to the businesses who are listening to this on what they could be doing. I'll just pause here for Q&A. If anyone wants to put anything additional in the chat to ask our panelists, please do so at this point. I can see we have had one question, which is about whether Fairtrade is planning to add more requirements for farms to reduce their environmental impact. And I'm kind of happy to share a few thoughts on that from the Fairtrade perspective, which is just to say, I mean, the environmental sort of impact on farmers and workers and the climate crisis is an absolute priority for us as Fairtrade. That is 100% what we're geared towards, trying to support farmers and workers through. We would, you know, obviously want to make sure that our standards are best in class. That's what we're known for. You know, we are the certification that would want to have the highest standards out there. However, we are not prepared to just put the entire onus on the farmers and workers. We don't want to solve the climate crisis by putting more and more requirements at the farm level, asking them to do more, deliver more, pay for higher inputs. It's not cheap to become more environmentally friendly. There's costs associated with that without involving the entire supply chain and doing that in collaboration. And hopefully that's what's kind of come through from today, is that we've talked through partners who understand that, who want to listen to farmers and workers and support them through that, whether that's paying a higher price and the fair price, or whether that's through a programmatic investment or through activation in the market to really raise awareness and build consumer understanding of some of these challenges. And that's the approach that we would take to this, is very holistic, rather than just putting all the onus back down on farmers and workers when we know they're not the ones generating the highest carbon footprint. That's actually coming from us. I have also got a question for you, Rebecca, in the chat, which is just if any brand has had negative feedback on social media after communicating actively on COP26, whether you saw any of that from your side.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Whenever we put anything out that's vaguely values-based, we, without fail, get comments like, stick to ice cream. I don't want politics mixed in with my ice cream. What do you know? You know, we invariably get things that say, stay in your lane, effectively. And the problem with that is it's nonsense, because everything's affected by everything, right? Our lane is actually very highly impacted by the climate crisis, as is everything else. I think it's very it's a very privileged position to say I'm going to be apolitical. Like, not many people can actually do that, and businesses have to realize that they actually are political, whether they like it or not. They maybe just aren't acting on that power that they have. The way that we talk about it at Ben & Jerry's is, with progress comes pushback. You're always going to get pushback. The question is, what risk are you willing to take, right? So there are businesses out there that are not willing to risk any kind of negative comments or any kind of negative feedback. We as Ben & Jerry's are not willing to risk undermining the movement, bringing difficulty to our partners, failing to serve the folks that grow the crops that make the Ben & Jerry's, not taking up our place as a global platform in calling for justice. So I think you can ask which risk you're willing to take, and that will help guide you. And also know that whilst 100% we are there to serve the movement, and as Shah said, the activism is not there to serve the business is there to serve the activism. Know that Ben & Jerry's is a €1 billion company and we've been activists all along. So it can be done, and don't be afraid is what I would say.
Thank you, Rebecca. What a fantastic final thought for us to end on there. And I was scrolling through the comments to see if there are any more questions, and I'm just seeing waves of positivity from the audience towards what they've heard today. So huge thank you to the panelists. We're just going to do a short poll now with the audience, if that is going to come up, I think, any second now. Brilliant, here we go. So if everyone is able to quickly fill in the poll, that would be amazing. The business pledge, as we've said, loads of information about it on our website. You can head to fairtrade.org.uk if you would like to read more about that, or you can get in touch with us if you have any questions. And hopefully today's conversation is a little insight into what we're hoping to build through the network of like-minded businesses with different perspectives, but the same sort of ambition to work towards solving some of these giant challenges that we're facing through engaging with farmers and empowerment and a bottom-up approach. And that's really been the theme for today that I felt is that partnerships and empowerment and action and activation have really come through very strongly as tangible ways that you can tackle what might seem like an insurmountable issue for your business. So if there is any business listening to this who's feeling overwhelmed, I hope you felt encouraged by those who have come and spoken to us today, and that you would look through the business pledge, and that you'd be very welcome to join the network that we're planning to launch to really help you solve some of these challenges. And so as you do the poll, I'll just turn back to our panelists for one last thought each from one of you as we head off. So maybe starting with you, Cabasu, one final thought since you were the first to answer a question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna, once again. Maybe just to wrap it up, and speaking like rather based in the South and running and supporting producers in the implementation phase. A thought, and which is critical, and all the panelists have spoken about, is to see how best we can embrace and all of us support each other and build that ecosystem where we are supporting producers through paying fair prices, because this is the only way that we can say that businesses are compensating for their climate impact to farmers. And this way, if it happens, then farmers and workers will be able to put in place practices and mechanisms to adopt practices leading towards mitigation of climate change. Yeah, thank you very much, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Cabasu. And Catherine.
Hi, sorry, just getting distracted by the results of the poll there. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Sign the Fairtrade pledge, buy more on Fairtrade terms, don't let perfection get in the way of doing good. What I'm trying to say is don't worry too much about it, of doing the perfect job, because, you know, we never get it right all the time. And that piece around cooperation and collaboration. If you're not sure what to do or are struggling, reach out to the businesses that are engaged in fair trade. Speak to me, speak to Rebecca, speak to Charles, speak to yourselves. We're all here to help. We're all in it together.
Lovely, thank you, Catherine. And Shah, over to you.
I mean, what to add to that? I mean, I think we got all the sort of key points here. I mean, I'd say just don't be afraid to stretch and go further than you think is possible, because actually it's probably what's needed. And actually, the other thing I would just sort of share is something someone said to me recently that's really I've been holding quite closely, and that is that in these times of need to really do some extraordinary things, we absolutely need to be guided by the science, and we need to be moved by the poetry. And I like that, because I think it's about bringing different sources of inspiration and creativity to the challenges ahead. And actually on my desk, you know, in the spirit of poetry, I have a little bit of some quotes, some lines from poetry that I'll just sort of share. It says, "Two things stand like stone, kindness in another's trouble and courage in your own. So I would just encourage people to think about those two words around kindness. And to me, that is about consideration for those, we all breathe the same air on this planet. So thinking about each other in that way. And then, you know, to pick up on the point, I guess it gave me the goosebumps when Rebecca said it, this idea of really just, you know, going for it, having the courage to engage. So thank you.
Love that. I want to get that on my desk. And Rebecca, last but certainly not least, over to you.
Yeah, also very hard to follow any of all. So much amazing, many amazing things have been said already. I think we talk a lot about being movement aware as Ben and Jerry's, and if you're an activist in any kind of issue, you'll be familiar with that. This idea that you need to be aware of your own strengths, where you can affect change, and also of your own limitations, where you're maybe not the expert. And in those situations, reach out to the people that are the experts. And again, climate justice is bigger than all of us, and no one person or actor has the answers. So it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take all of us with coming with a bit of humility, coming with a lot of transparency, and I think, as we've said, coming with a lot of courage to take this forwards.
Amazing. Thank you so much. There's one final poll question that's going to pop up if you can fill it in before you leave. But just to say a huge thank you to you as our panelists for joining. We really appreciate it. You're all very busy people, as everyone would have picked up from your bios, I'm sure, at the start. And particularly Kabasu, who has joined live from a cocoa farm in Côte d'Ivoire. That is really phenomenal effort. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I can tell the audience is really engaged and enjoyed your expert input to this debate. So huge thanks to you all.
Thank you for the great moderation as well, and to all the people that have helped make this technology work. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Really
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
very
you
much.
so much. Bye-bye.